Hello, I'm Beth Hamon from Kalos Ministries. I'm here to talk about Miriam, Moses' sister. Let me give you a little background information. I'm 49 years old. I've been married for 26 years. My husband and I have two children. Our son is 24 years old and our daughter is 20, and we are very happy empty nesters. We've had no adjustment period, which is wonderful. The big reason for that is one, our kids live close by, and two, I'm a kindergarten teacher. And so I get all of the little 5 and 6-year-old hugs and loves all day long. And I get to see their eyes light up when we do something exciting and fun. And then when they're tired and cranky, I can send them home at the end of the day and I can go home to my nice quiet house. So let's get started with Miriam. And we first see her in Exodus chapter 2. She is Moses' older sister. There is Miriam, and then Aaron is next. Aaron is 3 years older than Moses. And in Exodus chapter 2, verse 4, his sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. At this point, the Israelites are slaves in Egypt, and the Pharaoh has made a decree that all of the Hebrew boy babies are to be thrown into the Nile River. And so Moses' mother, and Miriam is accompanying her, has made a waterproof basket, and she's taking it down to the Nile River and sets it afloat. But then it doesn't mention Moses' mother. It only talks about Miriam when it says his sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. And so we can already tell that she is a brave little girl as she follows this basket down the Nile River. Then in Exodus 2, verse 5 through 7, it says, "The Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the riverbank. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her female slave to get it. She opened it and saw the baby. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. 'This is one of the Hebrew babies,' she said. Then his sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, 'Shall I go get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?' So already we see that a young child, she's a slave, and she is brave enough to approach Pharaoh's daughter, who is essentially royalty and in charge of everything, to advocate for her little brother. The next time that we read about Miriam, she is grown, and the Israelites have just crossed the Red Sea, while Pharaoh's armies were destroyed by the water. So Moses has led the Hebrews across the Red Sea. They've crossed on dry land, and as they look back and Pharaoh's army is chasing after them with their chariots, they are washed away by the water as it floats back in. And so everyone has seen this wonderful, miraculous event. They've been saved. It's just been an enormous event that Moses is so excited about that he leads them in praise. But Miriam is also a leader at this point, as we see in Exodus 5, verse 20 through 21. Then Miriam the prophet, Aaron's sister, took a timbrel in her hand, and all the women followed her with timbrels and dancing. Miriam sang to them." So this verse tells us that Miriam is a prophet, and she is a leader among the women. So we know already she's brave, and now she's a leader, and she is a prophet. In Numbers chapter 12, verse 6, God says, "Listen to my words. When there are prophets of the Lord among you, I reveal myself to them in visions. I speak to them in dreams." So God is speaking to Miriam in visions and in dreams. And prophets have the task of faithfully speaking God's word to the people. They were an instrument of guiding to the nations. And so Miriam is described as a leader, a prophet. And so a lot of times we only think about Moses, how he is a leader, and we kind of forget that Aaron was a prophet and Miriam was a prophet, although we do know that Moses was God's chosen leader. Okay? However, despite the fact that we see that Miriam's a prophet and she's brave, and she's bold, and a leader of the women. We read about her again in Numbers chapter 12, verse 1 through 16. This is a little bit longer, but this is going to give some insight to what is going on after the Israelites have moved through the desert. It's been a couple of years, and they've been fed manna. So God has provided manna for them every day. He's given them water, and when they got all complaining, tired of manna, then God gave them meat. And so all of these things that they see every day have become commonplace. And we can be like that as well. Sometimes we get in the routine of reading our Bible, and we tend to forget that Jesus died for our sins. What a great thing that is. Or miracles are happening every day. God is interceding for us all the time, and we may not always be aware or even acknowledge that. And at this point, Miriam and the Israelites have gotten into a routine. They get up, they collect their manna, they make their bread and their food with it, and they move on, and they look for God to guide them. So let's read a little bit in Numbers. It says in chapter 12, Miriam and Aaron began to talk against Moses because of his Cushite wife, for he had married a Cushite. Has the Lord spoken only through Moses, they asked? Hasn't he also spoken through us? And the Lord heard this. Now Moses was a very humble man, more humble than anyone else on the face of the earth. At once the Lord said to Moses and Aaron and Miriam, "Come out of the tent of meeting, all three of you." So the three of them went out. Then the Lord came down in a pillar of cloud. He stood at the entrance of the tent and summoned Aaron and Miriam. When the two of them stepped forward, he said, "Listen to my words. When there are prophets of the Lord among you, I reveal myself to them in visions. I speak to them in dreams. But this is not true of my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. With him I speak face to face, clearly and not in riddles. He sees the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses?" The anger of the Lord burned against them, and he left them. When the cloud lifted from above the tent, Miriam's skin was leprous. It became as white as snow. Aaron turned toward her and saw that she had a defiling skin disease. And he said to Moses, "Please, my Lord, I ask you not to hold against us the sin that we have so foolishly committed. Do not let her be like a stillborn infant coming from its mother's womb, with its flesh half eaten away." So Moses cried out to the Lord, "Please, God, heal her." The Lord replied to Moses, "If her father had spit in her face, would she not have been in disgrace for 7 days? Confine her outside the camp for 7 days. After that, she can be brought back." So Miriam was confined outside the camp for 7 days, and the people did not move on till she was brought back. Imagine her humiliation as she was forced outside of the camp on her own, and everyone waited for her. I see that only Miriam was stricken with leprosy and not Aaron. To me, that indicates that Miriam was the instigator or the leader of this grumbling against Moses. She was jealous. She had become puffed up and prideful in her role in what was in the Israelite community, in her leadership. So the gifts that God had given her have been used to commit sin. She led Aaron into grumbling. And we notice that God had said that Moses was the most humble man on earth. And so I feel like that was emphasized because Miriam and Aaron had become prideful and concerned about their leadership and how their role is among the Israelites, that Moses was greater than they were. As I think about it, it's kind of hard to think about Miriam and how she felt as she sat outside the tent for 7 days, thinking about what people were saying about her. I kind of have a small feeling of that. An example for me was when I was 9 years old, and I had a best friend lives across the street, and she had a little sister who was 5 years younger than me. So I was 9 and her little sister was 4, and we would play with her every day. And as you know, you don't always want your little sister or brother hanging around and playing with you, and we weren't always wanting her around. And one day she got angry with us and she bit me on the arm. Not very hard, she's 4, couldn't hurt very much. I turned around and very hard, leaving marks, bit her back. A 9-year-old bit a little 4-year-old girl very hard. And let me tell you, her mom was not very happy with me at all. She marched my little self right out the door, and she told me I could not come back for a week. That was a long trek across the street. I was dragging my feet as I went home. And of course, when I walked in, my mother knew what happened, and I was so embarrassed and so ashamed. And for the next week, I thought about what I did and became more ashamed and embarrassed about biting a little girl. And when it was time that I could go back and play again, I didn't really want to go. I didn't want to go back and face them. I was embarrassed. And so I can imagine in my small embarrassment at 9, how big her embarrassment is at her age. And this whole community, it's not just a mom and the kids, as in my case, but this whole community was aware of what she did. They were waiting on her, and so she walked back in. Do you think that maybe they were whispering, and that she came back, dragging her feet with her head down? I would be so ashamed at what had happened. But what we need to remember about this, although she had great leadership ability, it was used for sin, but we can't keep looking at that mistake, that sin, no matter how big or small. We can't keep looking at it and playing it over and over in our heads and bringing it up again. Once we've asked for forgiveness, Jesus forgives. He forgives right away. We don't have to keep bringing it up and talking it over again. Now, what we can do is we can forgive ourselves, and we can use that to help others and to teach others. Just as Miriam is mentioned in the Bible, this incident is in the Bible. She'll always be associated with following and advocating for a little brother, but she's also going to be known for this time where she gossiped and grumbled and sinned. Fortunately, she had a brother to advocate for her. Jesus wasn't there to advocate for her, but her brother prayed for her, and she was restored. I feel like it's important for us to remember how important it is for us not to keep replaying the same things over and over, to use those mistakes for the good for others, and to be able to move on. I've given you some discussion questions, and instead of ending in a prayer, I would like for you to pray for each other and to write down on note cards the prayers that people have given to you and to each other. Take those note cards home and pray for each other each day. That's a good routine. I know that sometimes our prayer time or our study with Lord and reading can become routine, but when you're thinking about people on these cards, these real life issues and problems and concerns, that's a wonderful way to get outside of yourself. I also want you to carefully consider those things that are continuously causing you issues and problems. Talk about that with each other. Be a help to each other, and I hope that you have enjoyed the time that we've spent together. Thank you.